Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and screen reads on ShawNshawNacting.com. Today we're going to review Reminiscence.
Journey through memory.
I know, I'm...
So people begin. Nothing is more addictive than the bad.
So this is a film by Lisa Joy. She's also a writer, so it's the really nice combination of writer-director, so there's no translation loss between script and the directing, so which I really like. A lot of times this can be really excellent because the world is fully evolved from the raw idea all the way through, and you just get a way more consistent idea versus you have like 3 or 4 writers that kind of patch together, and it's kind of this Frankenstein project. It usually works out okay, but you can tell there's a lot of compromise, and when you have that single director writer, there's a way less compromise, and you just get a better film, like a Scorsese film, or although Scorsese uses other people's film, scripts sometimes, but Quentin Tarantino comes to mind. Only the strongest directors can do this, I think, but it really makes a much stronger film if you can write and direct at the same time, because there's just no lost in translation effect. Time is 1 hour and 56 minutes, a little longer than like 1 hour and a half, but I think for a mystery you need a little bit more time, so there's not any lag time, I think, here. Hugh Jackman stars as Nick Bannister, this kind of detective memory guy. Rebecca Ferguson plays Mae, this girlfriend of his who disappears. Thandiwe Noonan plays Emily Watts Sanders, Nick's assistant in the lab, kind of running all these memory experiments for people. Cliff Curtis plays Cyrus Boothe, one of the terrible criminals, I think. Marina de Tavira plays Tamara Sylvan. Daniel Wu plays St. Joe, a drug dealer. So you have kind of this mystery background of a war kind of breaks out, and I think climate change has affected, the icebergs and everything has melted. So all the coastal cities that are really close to water and don't have much elevation are flooded, like Miami and also New Orleans. And this would be a real reality for some really flat states like this that are close to the coast. They would just be completely decimated by climate change, as far as if Antarctica melts and the North Pole melts, those cities are going to be completely lost probably. So it's a really interesting concept, I think. So the city is flooded. Nick runs this kind of memory center where you can access lost memories, which has become a very popular thing with the war and the tragedy of climate change. A lot of people live embittered, poor lives, especially in these coastal cities, and so it's kind of escape for them. This mysterious woman enters the memory center, Nick falls in love with her, and then she mysteriously disappears. So this is a really great concept, I think, and in the marketing, they really just show you what you need to kind of understand the story, which is really great, but not enough to really solve it, so you don't feel like there's no mystery to the story. So there's a really great marketing, hands off to the marketing team. Usually they completely ruin a film. I go to these movies all the time, and so I see a lot of trailers, and I usually try to ignore the trailers. I'm just on my phone the whole time, which, you're basically wasting all your marketing dollars, guys, I think, but maybe not for the average viewer. Maybe they're watching some of those trailers, but a lot of people are on their phones, so I don't know why they have all these trailers. It's just terrible. They should go back to 5 minutes of trailers, but anyway, this is a Hollywood cinema. Who knows what's in control of doing 40 minutes worth of ads to these people, because you're competing at HDTV where you can just download the movie and be like, we're going to watch it in 5 minutes, no ads, and you're showing 40 minutes of ads, and the experience isn't that much better. For some films, I think it does make a difference. This is a type of film where you could probably watch it at home and it's not that much of a big difference because it's more of a love story. There's not a lot of big kind of sets like a Star Wars effect where you kind of want to see those fine details kind of thing, but a lot of beautiful photography. But again, the cinemas, they really need to pick up the slack. I mean, where I go, they have food and everything, so they kind of changed that format, which I think is clever. I don't know why it took them 100 years, basically, because film started. Like in the 1910s, the film industry started, and it's like 2020, finally, maybe we should introduce better food, Like, dude, you guys could have figured out this years ago, decades ago. It's like, you've been leaving tons of money on the table. But they really didn't have a problem until you had VHS and Blu-ray and then digital streaming. Once digital streaming came, then it started really destroying the cinema business. They're kind of struggling between that. Who knows if they survive or not. Obviously, the drive-ins have been killed off for the most part. And so this is just the next stage of maybe the cinemas that are smaller are getting slaughtered, and we'll see what survives. Anyway, let's get to the story. This is a whole sidetrack rant. It starts as this love story. This guy that runs the memory center, he falls in love with his girlfriend, and he disappears, and then he's like, he's really struggling with it because why would she disappear? And it was like the love of his life kind of thing. And then it evolves into like a con game. So he's like, oh man, this is really interesting that she's a con artist, not just a love of his life. So that's kind of a really nice concept, I think. It's really interesting to have this kind of debate whether if you have your memories, are you going to really be lost in your memories, so to say, versus moving on with your life? I think a lot of people that suffer really deep tragedy in their lives, they kind of live in the past. There's just no way for them to live in the present because the present's so terrible. You can see those like war victims, which they have in the story as one of the sample persons of who is suffering from this, and just the memory center is the only thing they have left. Yeah, it's just interesting because you see this a lot too in homelessness or alcoholics, where they just get lost in their drug addiction, and that's kind of how they lose themselves from what's happened in their life. And it's just they kind of retreat. Either they cover up those memories that are really painful, or they relieve them, and they're kind of lost in the past, so to say. So it's really interesting take because it's a real reality of the human condition, that we have these memories that last a long time. Animals I don't think suffer as much as humans. They suffer in the sense that they might have a short-term memory of a year or two, but it doesn't probably last as long as humans, or at least so we think. Who knows? Hard to say there. I like the sense that this mystery kind of evolves clue by clue slowly over the time, and they don't shoot any unnecessary shots. A lot of mysteries kind of might have side tangents, and they never kind of piece it together, and you're like, it's just freaking annoying. I mean, sometimes that's a good way to do a mystery in a way, because it kind of sidetracks people, and you're like, oh, is it here? No, it's this. Why did you shoot all that? But it kind of doesn't come together well. This one comes together pretty succinctly. I think none of the scenes are overshot. It all kind of ties into the main theme eventually. So that's a really nice thing, because it doesn't seem that way at first, and then later kind of, oh, that ties into this, that ties into that. And you kind of have this, peel back the onion, and then everything pulls closely together. So that's a really nice effect in the story writing. And they have kind of this debate, which is worse, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or this kind of memory addiction, living in the past. And so it's kind of an interesting theme, which is the worst addiction to have, and you have separate characters that are living through each one of these addictions. So it's really interesting, and you actually have people that are burned in the memory, in the sense that they have completely lost themselves so much in the dream memories that they burn it into their brain. They can't get out of that one memory, and they just live it internally. And so you have this really weird kind of people that are destroyed mentally completely. You have this sense of like people on the coast, how would they survive when there's a world war and the whole city kind of collapses and they're flooded and most of the city's destroyed and people are living these kind of terrible lives at the top of skyscrapers, what remains. How would you be able to move ahead? Would you really be tempted to just go and live in your memory when there wasn't all this flooding and war and all this? And that's a real reality. You can see that after terrible times pass. For example, after any of the major wars, World War I, World War II, there's just this decade of kind of party it up, forget the war, just really enjoy life kind of thing. And you can see, especially I think in the 20s after World War I, and you had the pandemic then, and we have a pandemic now. So when this pandemic's over and the war's over, for example in Afghanistan, Iraq I guess is winding down, who knows, but that could lead to a lot of celebration around the world. So we'll see. Hopefully, maybe it leads to another war. Humans love to go to war eventually, right? They just can't let a slight down. China's a good example. They just keep living it over and over, the Japanese invasion, even though it's 40, 60, 70, 80 years back now. It's like, oh my God. But it keeps the government in power, the Communist Party there. So they talk about in the film, they always talk about kind of, oh, you were this person in the war, you were a colonel, you worked on this battlefront. It would have been really nice to kind of flash back to some of those war scenes. It would have made the film a lot more expensive, but it would have been really kind of, you'd see that, why those people kind of became who they were with kind of the tragedy of war kind of overlay. I mean, it would take longer, so it's kind of like the debate of how long is the film. It's already almost 2 hours. Maybe you would end 20 minutes of the film. Do you really want to make it 2 hours and 20 minutes? So I guess it makes sense just to tell it versus to visually show it, but it's always better to show versus tell, especially in the film format. So it would have been kind of nice, I think, to show some of those battle scenes, maybe a flashback. They have kind of this impossible landscape of Miami flooded. The fact of the matter is, once the city would have flooded to that high of level, or it's up to the skyscrapers, those skyscrapers would last a very short time frame, and flooded waters like that, water erosion is very severe. If you don't know, there's a skyscraper condo complex in Miami and had slight water issues, I think, underground with erosion from just rain, probably bad building design as well, but the rain eventually kind of cracked the pavement. They didn't get it fixed on time, and then the whole building collapsed, and it was just rain, right? Imagine when the whole half building is flooded. It's like, it's gonna last like maybe a year, maybe two, but it'll be like, the water erosion would be so severe, it would just kill those buildings really instantly, and all those structures would have to be abandoned. It would be like the lost city of Atlantis, basically. There would not, this whole dreamscape they kind of put together where Miami's flooded would just not exist. It's such a cool film idea as far as filming it. It's a really beautiful idea on paper, I think, and in film it's beautiful, but it's just not realistic. But hey, it's a film, you know. It's always fun to have kind of these weird landscapes like that. I love the idea of kind of this dream landscape that people use as a drug. There was some other film a while back with Leonardo DiCaprio, I can't think of the film, but it was really cool when they do these films where they kind of have flashbacks and live in the dreams and then come back to the reality, and they kind of lose some sense of what's reality, what is the dream world. So that's a really cool concept to kind of come back to as a sci-fi kind of film in a way. It has a touch of sci-fi with these kind of memory machines a little bit, but mostly a love story, a mystery. So I really liked it. I think it was really well put together, and it gets to the element of, as well, women lying to men and men that are in love. They probably don't see these lies. You know, that's kind of a reality of being a woman in a way. Not that all women lie, but you have to lie to survive in a way. Because, you know, there's terrible things that could happen to you. You could be raped, you could be suckered in by someone, killed off easily by another male, other women. So you have to be able to kind of navigate through society. And telling lies is just a way to kind of get around it sometimes. So women be much more adept at lying, I think, than men. Men obviously lie as well. But, you know, it kind of gets to kind of the secretive, mysterious nature of women as well. I think it's, you know, really well done. There's obviously men that sucker in women, obviously. There's a lot of scams. My mom, when I was growing up, she grew up under a lot of scams, and she would pull some scams, but she'd also get scammed herself. I mean, scammers hanging around each other. And just kind of the nature of it. You learn from a scammer, you become a scammer, and those scammers scam you. So, you know, it's just don't hang around the bad apples, you become a bad apple, right? There's a lot of truth to that. Living in a bad neighborhood, you become a bad person. You know, I grew up in some of the lower background neighborhoods. You hang around with other kids with single mothers and really have that issue of kids playing too long by themselves. They don't have a father figure to kind of guide them. And it really has an impact on kids eventually, and you just get into bad, you know, criminal kind of activities. I know I've done quite a few when I was younger, so definitely not the thing you want to get your kids into. You know, you want to keep that family unit, but that's not popular to say nowadays. You're supposed to say, like, people can do whatever they want. They don't need a father. You're like, yeah, they do. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I think it was a really good story. I'd recommend it. I don't know how many times you're going to see it because it's a mystery. So once the mystery is involved, I think if you see it every couple of years is kind of a thing, because after a couple of years, the plot is vague, and then you're like, you'd watch it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that detail leads to this, and that clue leads to that. So if you see it every couple of years, maybe every 4 or 5 years, I think it'll be a really good rewatch. Similar to Knives Out. I would definitely love to watch Knives Out, but I have to kind of let it settle a little bit so the mystery's kind of forgotten, and then I watch it and I'm like, ooh, that's fun, and this leads to that, and you can't have it too fresh in your mind, as like the story talks about here with the burning the memory. I had that effect watching Star Wars. I've watched Star Wars 4, 5, 6 so many times that I just can't watch it. I have it on Blu-ray. The last time I watched it, I think I was on Empire, which is one of the really great in the series. It's probably one of the stronger of the original trilogy. And I just got halfway through and I turned it off, you know? And it was one of my favorite films, but I knew every single dialogue line by line. It's like, it's just not enjoyable at that point. Some people, I guess, like to get to that point, but I just got to that point, I was like, it's just not watchable anymore. And it was like one of my childhood favorite films, you know? It's kind of a shame. So don't overwatch your films, guys. Watch them every couple of years. Don't let it burn into your memory like in this film. It definitely ruins the film for you eventually. So just, you know, watch those films sporadically. Don't watch them too much. I've done that a lot with 300. I don't think I've ruined that film yet for me, but I've watched that film many, many times. It's a great film. If you're ever looking for a job interview and you kind of hit that failure, you know, sending out resumes and hitting that wall, or 300 really make you break through. Watching that film, I think it's very inspirational for that type of job environment where you're hitting a lot of rejection and you have to just have that one single battle. That's a really great motivational film, I think, especially for guys, I think. But anyway, that's my film. I recommend it. Hope you guys want to subscribe. You can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.